For privacy reasons, I will not use any direct names of the places where events have taken place, or actual names of those involved. With that being said, things have been heating up around the globe, and I might not be able to share any stories if I die, thanks to my line of work, and I want to get one out. Sorry if this isn't written properly. I'm more of a fighter, not a writer. From raging firefights in the trash-covered streets in the Middle East to the busy ports of Southeast Asia, we had seen it all. Or so I thought. All of us had combat experience and came from different military backgrounds. We work all around the globe and conduct operations that are clandestine and those of a political nature on behalf of a certain three-letter agency in the United States. But thanks to miles of red tape and widespread misinformation, there are no direct ties back to the said agency. My name is Alan Walker, but the guys on the team call me Cowboy. We had just gotten back from a job in Africa and were granted a few days worth of downtime when we got the call to head back to the compound for an emergency mission briefing. Within the compound was our team room. It consisted of concrete walls with a steel blast door. It was our small slice of heaven. Pictures of our past areas of deployment were plastered on the walls, and each sleeping area had its own items and memorabilia of home. My team leader, Tex, sat on a beat-up recliner in the middle of the room, wearing cargo shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, cleaning his rifle and humming a country tune. Across from him was Cutter, our go-lucky wise-ass machine gunner who was lifting weights and talking to a fling he picked up when we were in town. His Mickey Mouse holding an M2 Bravo tattoo he got on his leg while we were in Japan flexed with each squat. Jax, our shaggy-haired hippie intel specialist, sat legs crossed in a concentrated trance, trying to meditate with all the noise in the room. That was the scene as I walked in with an off-brand bottle of beer in one hand and phone in the other. My lucky ball cap hung loosely on my head, drenched in sweat after an intense workout session. "Cowboy!" Tex yelled, waving me over. Several things were going through my mind at that moment. Did I fuck up? Are we finally being sent out? Did Jax finally come out of the closet? Those were the thoughts racing through my mind as I walked over to him. "What's up?" I asked, trying not to sound worried. "Word through the grapevine is, you're getting married?" he said with a cocked eyebrow. I didn't look away from him, feeling all eyes on me. A big shit-eating grin spread across my face. All at once, the guys started whooping and hollering. "Who's the lucky guy?" Cutter jabbed. "A nice woman I met in Texas." I winked. The wedding was put on the back burner. We were being spun up again, and my soon-to-be wife, Sarah, understood I couldn't be home. "You do realize this line of work destroys relationships, right?" Cutter said, slapping me on the shoulder. "Look at Tex. He's been divorced, what, 3 times now?" Tex responded by flipping him the bird. "We're happy for you, cowboy." Jax handed me a new pair of running shoes, which I presumed were his as a gift. "You all are invited to the wedding. Tex is gonna be my best man." He lifted his rifle and inspected it closely. With the news out of the way, we gathered our gear and headed into the briefing room. It was game time. I sat in dead silence, my leg bouncing endlessly. No one spoke a word as we waited. A large table sat in the middle of the room. Across from it, a large LCD screen with the company's logo on it was sitting idly, mounted to the wall. I looked around the room and was about to speak to Jax, who was taking out a notepad and pen, when the door cracked open and 2 people entered. As they entered, I saw a woman wearing a parka that had our company logo on it step in, with her gold blonde hair tied into a neat bun. Accompanying her was a man with shaggy black hair with a few days' worth of stubble growth covering his face. They made their way to the front of the room, regarding us with cautious eyes. "Gentlemen," he paced back and forth. "You all are being tasked with a high-risk operation in Alaska. Check your packets and take notes." He walked over to the table, handing out packets. "This is Dr. Stone. She will be accompanying you." He extended his hand out to the doctor. I nodded in her direction. "Gentlemen," I know you just got back, but I need you to understand how important this is. We're talking about life-saving discoveries. Dr. Stone looked at each of us. I opened my packet. Pictures of deer frozen in place with their skin decomposed, with massive growths in different sections of their bodies, were plastered on one page. I flipped to the next. What I saw intrigued me. A group of campers were in the same condition as the deer, laying in place and patches of skin decomposed, with large masses in other places. Ma'am, what exactly is life-saving about this? Cutter asked. I kept looking through the packet. If we can find out what is causing this cellular degeneration and mutation, we can try to reverse its effects. She responded. We were given 10 minutes of downtime. I made a short phone call to my soon-to-be wife before we boarded the plane. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity. Hello? Her voice came to life. Hey babe, just wanted to let you know I'll be back before you know it. She let out a quiet laugh. Come back alive, and we will see what happens. Don't keep me waiting. I smile at the bold response. Yes, ma'am. Hanging up the phone, I picked up my sea bag and wheeled my gear towards the plane. The large, 2-engine plane, I forgot the make and model, landed shortly after 2100 hours in an empty field in the Alaskan wilderness. We stepped off and followed the doctor to our staging area. Wind whipped at my face, stinging my cheeks with each powerful gust. I made it through a thicket of trees that led to an open clearing. In the center of the clearing sat an ancient and very large cabin that seemed out of place out here in the middle of nowhere. I blew into my freezing hands, trying to warm them up while walking into the dark interior of the cabin as Tex tried lighting a fire in an ancient-looking fireplace. The interior of the cabin was nice, but looked like it had not been touched in decades. Cobwebs lined every corner of the living room, and dust caked every surface. Our pilot, an older man with deep gray hair and a thick mustache, who I'll call Samson, was talking with the doctor about the approaching weather and the possibility we might not be able to leave if it got any worse. She frowned and waved him off before continuing unpacking her gear, while Jax and Cutter were getting geared up for the mission. I'd rather be dodging bullets than freezing my ass off, Cutter muttered as he walked around the cabin. Alright, there was a herd spotted a few miles northeast of here. All I need is a small tissue sample from the infected area. It's bacterial, as you know, so make sure to glove up when collecting it, and don't get any of it on you, Dr. Stone said, rubbing her hands together, looking at her laptop. I need one of you to stay with me though, for security reasons. She looked at each of us. I looked at Cutter. Cutter will help you with anything you need. Tex said with his southern drawl. Tex. He began to complain, but Tex gave him the "if you have a problem, you can sit outside" glare. Nothing else was said as we waited for further instruction. No one should be out here other than us. She looked at her laptop, clicking on things and typing away as I slipped on my plate carrier over my parka, fidgeting with it until it sat snug against my chest. Do you really need all that gear? It's not like you're going to be fighting insurgents out there, Dr. Stone asked, looking up at us from her laptop and lab equipment. Yes, ma'am. It's for our safety and yours, and you never know what's out there, I responded while fastening the chin straps of my helmet, then testing my knots, ensuring that it worked properly. Comms check. Jax's voice buzzed in my headset. I gave him a thumbs up. It's go time, gents. We will keep you in the loop, Cutter. Tex squeezed his shoulder, reassuring him, as we walked out the door towards the suspected herd out somewhere in the frozen landscape. Small white plumes of smoke wafted through the cold winter air with each breath I took as we made our way through the snow-filled woods with a soft crunch. With each step, no words were spoken between us. We were focused on the task at hand. The stars and moonlight created wicked shadows underneath the thick trees. Every few steps or so, a branch would crack and animals would scurry, causing the hair on my neck to stand up and my finger to hover ever so close to the trigger of my rifle. We walked in a staggered line, looking for any sign of the hurt. After checking my watch, I estimated we had been walking for 15 minutes before Tex gave the hand gesture to stop. "Contact front," his voice hissed in my headset. I dropped to one knee and scanned my sector, quickly glancing over at Tex's area. I couldn't see what he was seeing, but it had him worried. He signaled for me to flank left. I complied, slowly making my way up the flank, scanning for the contact in question. The darkened woods was blanketed in a green dull glow from my knots. Nothing but dense vegetation skewered my vision. But after a few more steps, I stopped dead in my tracks. About 10 meters to my front, a figure sat hunched over. 2 IR lasers from Tex and Jax bounced over its crumpled figure. I raised my rifle, following suit. "Cowboy, make contact," Tex ordered. Fuck. Scared shitless, I slowly crept towards the figure, ensuring I was not crossing the other guy's lane of fire. Its chest hitched with each ragged breath it took. "What is it, cowboy?" Tex asked. My eyes widened. "You," was all I was able to say, before it sprung towards my legs, grabbing hold. I had little time to react. The world became a blur as the thing launched out, latching onto me, causing me to fall on my back. Fucking shit! I started kicking outwards, trying to get some distance between me and whatever the fuck was now crawling up my leg. Through sheer panic and furious kicking, I heard a voice. "Help!" It croaked with a hoarse voice. "Help me!" My knots were knocked off balance, but through one eyepiece, I saw a bloodied and bruised face staring up at me. I managed to break free from the person's iron grip and scrambled back to my feet. With my rifle now leveled at the person's chest, I backed up a few steps. "Stop or I'll shoot," I ordered. The figure complied. Jax and Tex materialized at my side in an instant. "Shit, cowboy," one of them let out a breath. Jax now kneeling at the figure side, he activated the light mounted on his helmet. A severely injured man who was now visible was at our feet with what looked like a deep stab wound on his stomach. A large ragged scratch was on the side of his face. He was wearing a ruined sweater and jeans with no shoes on. He whimpered, looking at us with terrified eyes. "What did this to you?" Tex asked, looking around us, making sure we were not being watched. "That way." He pointed back from where he came with a shaking hand. I looked, but saw nothing in particular, other than the footprints from the man. "I've got movement outside." Cutter's voice shattered the silence. "That's not us. Be ready to engage." Tex responded quickly. "Shit," Cutter cursed. Between the quiet cursing from Tex and the moaning from the wounded man, I heard a soft, crunching sound. "What the fuck is that?" Jax asked quietly. "Shh." I lifted one of my earpieces, exposing my right ear so I could hear a little better. 3 holes found their place in the wounded man's chest. Blood seeped out of his mouth as he slouched over, now dead. The mission had changed now. It was just us versus whoever was shooting. Jax killed his light and hit the deck. I did the same. "Contact 12 o'clock, Jax grunted. 2 IR lasers bounced over our position. "Shit, they have night vision," I whispered. Tex raised his rifle and returned fire. Jax got up and maneuvered back, while Tex laid down suppressing fire. My heart was pounding like a drum against my chest. "Cowboy, cover!" he ordered. While laying on my stomach, I raised my rifle and fired off towards the 2 figures, causing them to take cover momentarily. "Cowboy, move," Jax said, his voice calm as still water. "Moving," I shouted. Snow and patches of frozen dirt kicked up around my legs from enemy fire as I ran from the dead man. I could see where Jax and Tex were set up as I made my way towards them. They were staggered a few feet apart from each other, taking cover behind some small pine trees. I flew past Jax and spun around on one knee, my rifle raised, firing back at the two gunmen. "Jax, move!" I yelled. Just as he broke cover and began to run, one of the enemy lasers found its way onto his back. I instantly followed it back to the shooter, who was now positioned behind a fallen log a few feet away from where they had first fired from. I placed my IR laser on the shooter's chest, firing off a small burst. The shooter clutched his neck and stumbled forward. His partner moved from cover, trying to grab him. Big mistake. I placed my laser on the second shooter's chest and fired the rest of my magazine into him, watching him clutch his stomach. And click. The bolt on the rifle locked back. My rifle was empty. I hit the mag release and slammed in the fresh magazine, slapping the bolt release in one fluid motion. "Contacts down. Moving," I stated, quickly working my way towards the downed shooters. Jax and Tex were following close behind. The shooter I had originally shot lay dead in the snow. His comrade was close by, groaning in pain. I kicked away his rifle and kept mine leveled at his face. "Please," he gargled, steam coming off of his warm blood that was beginning to spread through the snow. "Who do you work for?" Tex asked with no emotion. I kneeled down and pulled the mask, covering his face down. Sad eyes looked up at me as I began to search his body for intel. He wore a white uniform with a black chest rig that bore no insignia or markings, but he did have a decked-out AK platform, outfitted with a suppressor and IR laser system, much like my M4 setup. "Might be Russians." I shook my head. "We need to get back to the cabin." Tex huffed as he checked the other body. "Cutter, what's your status?" There was no response. The wounded man grabbed my leg. "You don't know what's out there. We tried," he said in broken English. His breathing began to slow down, and his grip began to loosen on my leg. "Cutter, do you read me?" Tex tried again, but there was no response. The wind had begun to pick up, and light snowfall had started trickling down. It was quiet now. "Tex, you need to get your ass back here, now," Cutter said with a panicked voice. "What's the situation?" Tex responded quickly. In the distance, we could hear dull, rapid thuds. It had to be Cutter. "There's a fuckload of them," was all Cutter replied, before the comms went silent once more. "Let's move, gents." I followed a few steps back from Jax, bringing up the rear. I was scanning my sectors when we entered another clearing. We were not too far from the cabin when it caught my eye. Off to my right, in a vast open plain, were dozens of figures, all sat still, like pieces on a chessboard. "Contact right," I called out. "Too many for us to deal with. We need to hustle." The cabin was now in my sight. The orange glow from the fire inside shone like a beacon from a lighthouse during a storm. "Cutter, we're coming in. Hold your fire," I said into my mouthpiece. As we drew near, I could see the holes from where Cutter had been shooting outward. One of the windows were smashed open, but barricaded by things from inside. I was the last one to enter the cabin before closing the door. I looked outward to see the large number of figures out in the snow, now slowly getting closer. I flipped my knots up, slammed the door shut, and turned around to see a scene of pure chaos. Inside was a mess. Samson was sprawled out on the floor, next to the shattered window, the top half of his head missing. He had several bullet wounds all over his body. Cutter had a bandage wrapped around his right leg above the knee where something had hurt him. He also had a large gash above his right eye that was beginning to swell. Dr. Stone sat at her desk, with dried blood splattered all over her face and hair. She was in a state of shock. "What the hell happened?" Tex asked, looking at Samson's battered corpse. "Those things outside attacked him and tried to get me." Cutter was on the verge of screaming, breathing rapidly. "What things?" Jax asked. He pointed at the boarded up window. "The things outside. Didn't you see them walking around out there? I walked over to the doctor and placed my hand on her shoulder, giving it a squeeze. Ma'am, we have to get you out of here. She looked up at me, but said nothing. Jax, can you fly the plane? I asked, thinking of other exit strategies. We can't walk out of here. A storm is heading in, and if we wait any longer, we will be stuck out here with those things. I tried not to panic. I can fly it, but we don't have time to pack any of this shit up. If we're leaving, we need to go now. He walked over to the window, looking out to find any signs of movement. Tex, this op is fucked. We need to get the doctor out now. I looked over at Tex, who was leaning against the wall by Cutter. You're right, cowboy. We do, but we need to make a dash to the plane. But Cutter can't run. I looked over to Cutter, who propped his leg up on a broken chair. How bad is it? I looked at him. Bad. He gritted his teeth as he settled in. Things were looking bad for us. A loud crash came from somewhere deep inside the cabin. Everyone flinched. I'll check it out. Get ready to move, I said, walking towards the hallway leading to the back of the cabin. Hurry your ass up, cowboy, Tex ordered. Slowly turning my way down the hallway, it proceeded to get darker and darker. I turned the light attached to my rifle on. Its white beam split the darkness and revealed more doors on each side of the hall. The voices in the living room began to fade as I moved farther into the cabin. Soon, all I could hear was my own breathing. One foot in front of the other, room after room, I finally made it to the kitchen. The back window was smashed open. Glass scattered across the floor along with a large smeared streak of blood. A small prep table sat in the middle of the kitchen. There was a solid wooden door barred shut on the opposite side. Cooking utensils sat in their racks untouched, other than the ones hit by whatever smashed in the window. I strained to listen, but all that I could hear was the wind howling through the now busted window. And that's when I heard it. Labored breathing. It was shallow and rapid. The breathing was coming from behind the table. I put the red dot sight on my rifle where I thought it was coming from and fired off 2 rounds. A bloodied person wearing the same white uniform and gear as the man we got into a gunfight with fell onto his side, writhing in pain, hissing. His face was all beat up with what looked like deep lacerations and bite marks. He began to flail around as small patches of skin were beginning to decay. I pumped 2 more rounds into his head, sending gray matter and blood onto the wall and floor. I turned away and hustled back towards the living room. One of them got inside. It's dead now, I said, looking back toward the kitchen. Collect a sample from it and let's get out of here, the doctor said shakily. The fuck is going on, Doc? Cutter snapped. Another crash came from the kitchen. We need to move now. I raised my rifle, covering the hallway. Another figure slammed into the wall at full speed, falling to the floor. This time, it looked like an Alaskan native. Its short figure wrapped in a fur coat, stained with blackened blood. A hood was obscuring its face. I fired 3 rounds into his chest, causing it to fall over. Then another figure ran into my lane of fire, and I did the same to it, sending it to the floor. Last man, Jax yelled from behind me. I began to backpedal as more began to stream out from the kitchen, now firing wildly. I emptied my magazine and ran out the door, hearing the guttural and agonizing screams of the creature close behind. I picked up the pace and was running as fast as possible. I could see the outlines of the others in front of me in dim moonlight. After flipping down my knots, it revealed a whole other situation. More figures were trying to make their way towards the group. I slammed in a fresh magazine. There were 4 left, excluding the one I had just put in the rifle. Tex, you have more coming up the right, I yelled into my mic. Cutter let loose a stream of fire from his saw. The red tracers flew into the group that was quickly advancing towards them, causing their advance to slow down a little. Cowboy, hurry your ass up, Jax yelled. I was sweating now, and everything seemed to speed up. I was closing the distance between us when Dr. Stone looked back at me in horror. She was yelling something, but I couldn't hear her over the wind and screaming. Looking back, I saw a larger mass converging on our position from the cabin. Then something hit me in the face, causing one of the lenses of the knots to crack. Did I just get hit with a fucking rock? I almost fell, but recovered quickly. Still running at full speed, I tried to close the gap. Another object collided with my helmet, causing me to see stars. Trying to dodge the incoming projectiles, I could make out the plane in the distance. Jax and Cutter were the first ones to enter, followed by Tex and the doctor.
Run, and don't fucking look back,
was all I heard from the headset. As the plane was getting closer, I could hear its engines whining over the howling winds and screaming. Someone was on the side ramp waiting. It was Tex waving me in. The plane started rolling forward as I sprinted.
Come on,
he yelled. The plane began to pick up speed. I got as close to the ramp as I could. With an arm outstretched, I jumped towards Tex with all my strength. I felt his grip tighten around my wrist while trying to pull me closer. I managed to get one leg up when something grabbed the other. A searing pain shot up my leg. I looked down to see a figure latched onto my foot. It had a vice grip on it, and I could feel the ligaments tearing and bones cracking.
Fucking shoot it,
I yelped. A shot rang out, and the iron grip loosened, straining hard as I managed to crawl into the plane. I laid in the center aisle of the plane, staring at the ceiling, flipping my busted knots up. I was met by Tex's gaze.
Looks like you took a hit.
He wiped away on something on my forehead, causing it to sting.
Just a scratch.
I winced. Something was slamming into the sides of the plane.
We've got company,
Jack said over comms.
Hang on.
The plane lurched upwards, causing Tex to lean into a seat. After a few tense moments and some very bad turbulence, things were calm and smooth. Tex helped me stand up, and I limped towards the front of the plane. Dr. Stone sat in an empty seat near the cockpit. I sat down across from her. She looked at me with swollen, puffy eyes.
I fucked up,
she said quietly, trying to hold back tears.
And it's all my fucking fault.
She looked at me, then down at her feet.
Doc, there's always tomorrow,
I respond, trying to brighten up the shitty situation. Jax landed us back in New Mexico after getting fuel at an undisclosed base. The sky was beginning to turn from a brownish gray to a crimson orange from the rising sun.
Doc,
I managed to get you a sample, Cutter said while wobbling down the rows of seat.
From where?
She asked, a confused look spread across her face. I looked up at Cutter. His condition had worsened over the past several hours. His skin began to turn pale, and the bandage around his leg had a large brown spot that was starting to soak through.
Oh fuck. Cutter, you're...
was all I managed to say, feeling sick to my stomach. Cutter cracked a smile and looked at me with tears in his eyes.
Sorry, I can't make it to the wedding, cowboy. Kiss that lucky lady of yours for me.
He exited the plane and was put on a stretcher, wheeled away by people in hazmat suits. I limped off the plane and was stopped by people dressed in the same hazmat suits. They asked a series of questions.
Were you bitten?
I shook my head no.
Did you get any of the substance in your mouth or in any wounds?
I shook my head again. They led me into a decontamination tent that was covered in biohazard symbols. They stripped me naked and put me in a concealed room after a scalding hot decontamination shower. Every few hours, a person in a hazmat suit would check in on me, taking a blood sample and asking questions. Hours turned into days. I slept mostly and ate whatever they would give me. I closed my eyes once more, waiting for the inky darkness to take over. I awoke back in the cabin on the floor. I reached for my rifle but couldn't find it. Looking around, I saw the bodies of the doctor, Jax, Cutter, Tex, and Samson. They all looked like they were decaying. I stood up and stumbled into a wall. I looked at my hands. They were starting to turn pale and skin began to peel off, decaying in chunks. My mouth opened, but no scream came out. Jack crawled over to me from the chair he was seated in, chunks of flesh falling from his face as he slowly stood. "Wake up. Wake up," he croaked. My eyes snapped open, and I started swinging my arms wildly, screaming at the top of my lungs. "Calm down! Stop!" A blonde-haired woman wearing a lab coat was holding onto my shoulders. "Dr. Stone?" I stammered. "Yes, everything is fine. You're fine." She placed a hand on my cheek. "You've been cleared. You can return to your team." She helped me stand. What about Cutter?" I asked slowly, walking to the door. She avoided my gaze, but handed me a white t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. "Put these on before we exit." I slipped the clothes on and followed her. She put her security card against something on the door. A magnetic lock disengaged with a series of clicks, and the door opened to a long hallway. She led me out to the right. "Sorry it took so long. We had to make sure you were not infected." The fluorescent white lights hurt my eyes. Slowly they adjusted, and I could see heavy metal doors lined on each side of the hall, next to one another with observation slats. "What about Tex and Jax?" I felt sluggish, and everything seemed to go by slowly. "They're waiting for you back in the team room." There was a security desk and 4 armed guards at the end of the hall. While slowly making our way to the exit, another doctor was exiting from a room on my right. I managed to catch a quick glimpse inside. A naked person strapped to a table, skin pale, severely decaying in various areas. Our eyes met, and for a moment, they recognized me. There was sadness in them. Then, they were clouded by rage, and the person started screaming and thrashing against their restraints. I saw what looked like an outline of Mickey Mouse tattooed on his leg. I was reunited with Tex and Jax in the team room. They didn't know what happened to Cutter either. But I know what I saw in that hallway. I asked to use Tex's phone and called Sarah. Come on, I said to myself.
"Hello?"
Her worried voice answered. "Sarah? I'm so sorry."
"Alan? Are you okay?"
Trying to hold back tears, I told her there was an accident on the job, and that we lost Cutter. We eventually got a replacement, and were cleared for upcoming operations. But that's for another time. Stay safe out there.